जनरल रावत ने तो 2.5 में 1 पाकिस्तान 2 चाइना एंड 0.5 was the internal situation. असलियत ये है कि 2 is actually the internal situation and 0.5 is China and Pakistan.
Okay.
Because internally if things start getting out of hand, the weapons which were used, forensics later proved that they were the weapons which were actually going to the NSC and K. मैंने उनको यहाँ तक बोला कि मैंने कहा कि सर आप जितने भी ऑर्डरलीज है ना यहाँ पे सबको आप यूनिफॉर्म में डाल दो, मच्छरदानी के डंडे दे दो, अगर हथियार नहीं है कोई बात नहीं, वहाँ जाके खड़े हो जाएंगे, इनकी हिम्मत नहीं होगी. He was standing there leaning against the counter. So when I walked in, he said, "Are you Kunal?" I said, "Yes." वो पिस्टल लेके मेरे मुंह पे मारी खींच के and took the tape recorder from my bag and smashed it on the floor and started jumping on it. The whole problem in the valley came from the fact, initially when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, there was that Manorma rape case, if you remember. Later inquiries showed that it was a setup.
My honor to be here and thank you very much. Let me have the pleasure of shaking you by the hand as a Brit would say.
नमस्ते. आज के इस दी जयपुर डायलॉग्स पॉडकास्ट में आप सभी का स्वागत है. और आज हमारे साथ हैं शिव कुणाल वर्मा जी. एक पहले जर्नलिस्ट भी रह चुके हैं, मिलिट्री हिस्टोरियन हैं, फिल्म मेकर हैं. आपका स्वागत है शिव कुणाल वर्मा जी हमारे स्टूडियो में.
Thank you, sir.
और क्योंकि आपने बहुत लंबे समय तक जर्नलिज्म भी किया है और बहुत सारे जो घटनाएं हुई हैं उनको नज़दीकी से देखा है, तो और आप मिलिट्री हिस्टोरियन हैं, तो आपको ध्यान है हमारे पूर्व CDS जनरल रावत ने कहा था कि हम 2.5 फ्रंट को फेस कर रहे हैं. तो ये 2.5 फ्रंट में से दो तो हम जानते हैं, चाइना और पाकिस्तान. ये 0.5 फ्रंट क्या है?
सर जनरल रावत ने तो 2.5 में 1 पाकिस्तान 2 चाइना एंड 0.5 was the internal situation. लेकिन असलियत ये है कि 2 is actually the internal situation and 0.5 is China and Pakistan. सच्ची बात पूछिए तो. क्योंकि internally if things start getting out of hand, you've been a senior bureaucrat in this country, you know exactly how difficult it is to bring that kind of a situation under control. And especially in a country like us, where you've got such diversity and so many fault lines, which are, some are created, almost all are created. But some are also what you can call hereditary issues which have been handed down since the British period, etc. So there's a lot of issues which can be exploited by people. And it's very easy to flare up things, as we all know. So I personally feel the 2 element is actually more internal, and ये China and Pakistan तो handle हो जाएगा आराम से, कोई issue नहीं.
Okay. That's a new perspective. तो कई तरह के हमने देखे हैं, जैसे सेपरेटिस्ट मूवमेंट्स भी देखे हैं. एक तमिल सेपरेटिस्ट मूवमेंट था, आपको ध्यान है, that was very very serious at one time.
It's still on the horizon. It's not exactly died out completely. The North-South, it is getting more transformed into an economical thing, about a North-South dialogue, so to speak. Because a lot of states in the South feel that they are contributing a lot more to the national exchequer and they're not getting an adequate amount of money back. So you can take it in at any level. I mean, you have a serious problem today in Manipur. You have the Meiteis and the Cookies, which is not showing too many encouraging signs of sorting itself out. In fact, recently, I think there's been a major demonstration by the Meiteis as to, you know, they paraded an entire force out there of some 60,000 people, fully armed, etc. So they are very, very scary scenarios. And the worst part is that these are not new scenarios. We've been facing this since independence. In 1950s, as you know, we had the Naga uprising in what happened with Fizo and all that. This was followed by the problems in Mizoram, which were initially started with that bamboo flowering, and it just went off into another area altogether. You have insurgency in Manipur for a very long time now. It's been going on and on and on. And
I think almost since 50s.
Yeah, it's just continuing. You've had problems in Assam with the Ulfa. You've had issues in Tripura. You've had issues in, you name the state. I mean, Bihar, Chhattisgarh, all these areas you had the Naxalite problems and what have you. And invariably, if you see what has happened, there is a very clear link between a lot that happens internally and with China. Whether the training camps were then East Pakistan, or whether they were funded by ISI, etc. But the biggest thing is that most of the training camps in the Northeast, in any case, were all openly known to be in South China at that time. I'll give you one example of how interlinked this whole thing is. There was this, when General VK Singh was the chief, he had this intelligence unit which created a lot of
furore,
news, for which in my opinion, was all again made up stuff. But these chaps, there was Colonel Hani Bakshi used to head that unit. And one of his biggest achievements was that a huge catchment of weapons was coming through the Kachin Hills into the Northeast. And he had stopped it. And actually, his sources and his ability to do so, he had managed to do quite a lot of very good work in the short period the TSD had been there. But then they dismantled the TSD, they got after him, all that stuff started. So these weapons then moved from there. When Mr. V.C. Shukla was shot in the ambush in central India, in Chhattisgarh, I think, the weapons which were used, forensics later proved that they were the weapons which were actually going to the NSCNK. So, there is a complete, in the meantime, unko nahi ja paye, to inhone inko bech diya. So there's a huge market of which is there, which exists, which wants to destabilize the situation, and actually to bring that and keep it under control is a hell of a job. It's a hell of a job. You name the state, you've had problems there. You name the state.
Yes, this Maoist insurgency, I think, has been there in some of the southern states also, in the sense that the Kerala, Karnataka, these jungles, they also had.
Yeah, all that Veerappan and all was Karnataka. Kerala had its own share of very violent sort of movements, and Tamil movement has, it started with that whole language business, and then it just carried on and on and on. So it's easy to flare that up.
There was a long time when there were a lot of sympathizers for this Elam movement.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, I think we were sort of lucky that it got shifted a little bit into Sri Lanka. And most of the emphasis initially went there. And then, after that, when the final LTT collapsed, etc., for a while there's been a period of lull. I will not call it absolute. It hasn't gone off the surface. It's there.
And in between, what do you think that IPKF adventure or misadventure?
It was very badly handled. It was very, very badly handled. And that was the problem with the Rajiv Gandhi government. Rajiv Gandhi and I think the defense minister that time was Arun Singh. And they were completely in awe of General Sundarji. And in fact, General Sundarji ke saath, in the General VK Singh's book, Courage and Conviction, which I am the co-author, we've talked about what happened to the lead up to BlueStar. General Vaidya, who ironically was later shot for his role in BlueStar, had said to Mrs. Gandhi that no way are we going into the Golden Temple. In fact, General VK was then a major. He was in the in the MO directorate. So he and the DGMO, who was the Kurgi Lieutenant General from Kurg, and there was General Vaidya had gone to Mrs. Gandhi's house with the maps and everything to tell her that the MO directorate does not think a frontal attack or a central attack on the Golden Temple is a good idea. So it's documented in the book, and as they got there and they were just setting up their maps and stuff, and General Sundarji, who was the Western Army commander, arrived, and his car, flag and all that, and he's junior to General Vaidya, who's the chief. In fact, he should not have been there, but Mrs. Gandhi had called him, and he came and he overrode his chief. He says, "Ma'am, there's no problem. I'll clear out the Golden Temple in 5 hours. Aap mujhe just give me the go ahead. There's no problem. There's no problem. There's no problem." And boy, she took that advice. She just sidelined General Vaidya and General Somana, I think, was the DGMO. उनकी बात तो फिर क्या बोलते वो, जब आर्मी कमांडर कह रहा है मैं कर सकता हूँ. And she went with him. And then we paid a hell of a price because they didn't even have basic information about the Golden Temple when they've actually gone in. And it became, I've called it a botched up operation, which General Bulbul Barar and all have not liked and have countered that. But the fact is, I'm not questioning their loyalty or their ability to carry out the orders, but the orders were stupid. You don't go in like that. And I had actually been inside the Golden Temple before, and the army knew it. And I was in Assam. I was called before the assault. I actually met General Sundarji in Chandigarh. And he asked me, he says, what's inside? And when I started telling him so many LMGs, this, that, he lost interest. I've written about it in Hindustani in detail, how I was brought there. And then I was wondering what the hell I've been brought there for. And to make matters worse, he was my dad's immediate boss because my father was Brig Adam in 11th Corps in Jalandhar. His message to me was, don't bloody screw up my job here, by going and giving the general advice. So when he asked me a few questions, I started telling him, then he said, no, you journalists exaggerate. और जब वहाँ गए तो फिर उनको पता चला exaggeration क्या होता है. तो पूरा जनरल शाबेग वगैरह ने उसे सबको दिखाई दे रहा था. We knew what's coming.
I think there was an advice, I think, by some police officers that they should not go from the front, but instead
they needed to blow up the back.
Breach from.
They needed to blow up the back of the Akal Tak, gas those guys out. That, but General Sundarji had different ways of. So when he reacted to the IPKF scenario, they've actually rushed in with no idea, with no clear-cut plan. I mean, we initially went in to support the LTT.
Support the LTT.
And Jayawardene ran circles around Rajiv Gandhi's government, including Mr. Dixit. And before you knew it, you were suddenly fighting the LTT. General Harkirat was...
Jain Dixit was the High Commissioner there.
He was the High Commissioner. General Harkirat was commanding 54 Division. When the troops have landed in Sri Lanka, they had pouch ammunition, 32 rounds. You know how much time it takes to fire 32 rounds from an AK-47? 2.5 seconds, 3 seconds, 4 seconds. That's it. After that, what?
Not even 32 seconds.
Yeah. So, you go in thinking it's a picnic. And then you suddenly realize, and then you start fighting the very people you've gone there to defend.
How did that happen? ये कैसे हुआ कि आप गए हैं सपोर्ट करने LTT को और LTT से ही झगड़ा शुरू हो गया?
मुझे इतना मालूम है उसका क्या बैकग्राउंड है और क्या पॉलिटिक्स, हाउ द थिंग्स swung around. I haven't studied the IPKF thing to that extent. But I do know for a fact that some of the battalion commanders used to talk about it, how they would get intelligence that the LTT leadership is in XYZ area, and they would cordon off the area, and then they would go and inside a church or inside something, they would find these guys. But with them would be the raw intelligence guys sitting there. So what the hell do you do? फिर छोड़ना पड़ता था. फिर वो raw वाले बैठे हुए उनके साथ. So there was left hand not knowing what the right hand is doing, right hand not knowing what the left leg is doing, left leg not knowing what the right leg is doing. I mean, it was just pure chaos. And mind you, in IPKF, the soldiers again, whatever orders they got, they fought well. It's not an easy thing to fight the LTT, let me tell you. They were trained by the Mossad. And in fact, I was in India today in 1984 when I met General Kalkat, who later commanded the IPKF. And I met him at the NDC and we were talking and he told me, this is how the Mossad is training them, blah, blah. So I came back to the office and I told my bosses, I said, let's do a story on this, how the Mossad are involved in this. And we had this senior journalist, Mr. Dilip Bob. He climbed onto a chair and he was a huge map in Suman Dube's office and he said, see, Israel is here. Sri Lanka is here. You're telling us there's a connection. He made fun of me. So I said, nahi karna, mat karo. But later it all got established that Mossad was definitely involved. So they were very, very good fighters. I mean, the LTT was not only that, even our own Madras regiments and all have been some of our finest units. You had it. They have performed exceptionally well in combat also.
और अंग्रेजों ने उनको पे रखा था कि ये नॉन मार्शल तंबी है, इसको लड़ना नहीं आता.
तंबियों ने तो दिखा दिया ना फिर कि what is a तंबी and what is not a तंबी. They are very, very good, sir. And why shouldn't they be? If you look at the early history, the Cholas, the Pandyas, there's just one. I mean, they've been owned by constant battle. Whether it was the Pallavas, the Pandyas, or and as you then come into the later dynasties like Cheras and Osalyas and all, they were, I mean, it's just constant warfare. And they were very, very good. They were hard to take on and defeat. It took the 5 Muslim sultanates to get together to finally, the only time they ganged up and to defeat the Vijayanagar.
The Bavanis.
Yeah. No, Babanis were before the 5 sultanates came into being. These 5 sultanates then came together to defeat Vijayanagar.
I know, yeah, 1565, Talikota.
जी.
तो आजकल जो चल रहा है, you mentioned 1984. तो 1984 जो था वो ट्रिगर कहाँ से हुआ था?
1984 was a pretty dark year in our history. All kinds of things have happened in 1984. Siachen started in 1984. Mrs. Gandhi's assassination followed by the horrible riots, which I don't think we'll be able to live down. It is as bad as the partition riots. And 84 then finally culminated, I'm talking from my perspective, with the Bhopal gas tragedy in December, which again was quite horrific, the way things happened. I'm not talking about the conventional stuff, but even how Anderson was allowed to go in and escape, etc. It was all, the government did not look good. And it was a very traumatic period in the country's history because for 2 reasons. One, Mrs. Gandhi was a totalitarian kind of a leader who had been in the saddle for quite some time. And as Rajiv Gandhi himself said, when a large tree falls, the earth shakes. अब वो earth shaking में उन्होंने क्या horrendous चीजें कर दी. I don't think the Congress can ever live down the 84 riots.
ये जो कहते हैं कि 1984 जो है वो कांग्रेस ने प्लान करके किया था, is it correct?
तो जो हमने देखा था, I was on the streets. These guys were, they were certainly at the forefront. I don't know what evidences and all was subsequently gathered. I had got the list from AP. My book Hindustani starts with that, where the killings in Trilokpuri the next day were clearly defined. And I took that paper, I actually stole it. And I went to the Rashtrapati Bhavan. I tried to talk to the president. There was no security, there was no police, there was no army. I just parked my scooter, went up. Everybody knew me. I used to play squash there with the ADCs. And one of the ADCs was a naval officer, Jemi Jamwal, whose father was the area commander, who had been the GOC of 15 Division during Operation BlueStar. Now he was here. So I went there because I couldn't think of anything else to do. And the president was standing right there. I went past the JCO. वहाँ पे उनके प्रेसिडेंट्स क्वार्टर्स के इस तरफ JCO 4 JCO ADCs होते हैं और 4 ऑफिसर्स. None of the officers were to be seen. One ADC JCO was there. I saw Gyani ji, so I tried to talk to him. I said, "Sir, बाहर आग लगी हुई है, ये हो रहा है." But he was sedated. In fact, he wasn't listening to me. I held my hand like this and he was blankly looking at me. And the JCO came and put his hand on my shoulder and said, "साहब को दवाई दी हुई है, आप इनको छोड़ दो." So I moved away from there and I went to Jamwal's room and I just lay down and I must have dozed off because he woke me up. And he said, "What are you doing here?" So I showed him the list. वो मेरे साफ लिखा हुआ था. It was a Trilokpuri voters list. There were 4 or 5 names in 30 pages which said, "Do not kill." So the implication was kill everybody else. So I asked him, I said, "What do we do?" So he said, "You go to my dad." So I got onto my scooter again and took off. And by now it was pitch dark. And his sister was standing outside in Mandir Marg. And she jumped onto my scooter. We went to General Jamwal. He came out of the conference. He was in a conference. So he told the ADC.
And where, this was in the Kant area?
Yeah, Delhi area. Mandir Marg, Pratap Chowk. So he said, "हाँ बेटा, we were all in the beta relationship, तो सभी के साथ थी, and uncle." And so I said, "Sir, what is going to happen?" So he said, "Okay, you've told me. I don't have any troops." So I told him, I said, "Sir, I've seen some trucks burning on Ring Road." Before I'd picked up the papers, I'd photographed that. And I said, "Sir, one whole brigade has come. I know they are Mahar troops, they are Gurkhas, ये वो. So he says, नहीं, they've come for some other purpose. I said, sir, आग लगी भी है, वो other purpose क्या हो सकता है? मैंने उनको यहाँ तक बोला कि मैंने कहा कि सर, आप जितने भी ऑर्डरलीज हैं ना यहाँ पे, सबको आप यूनिफॉर्म में डाल दो, मच्छरदानी के डंडे दे दो, अगर हथियार नहीं है कोई बात नहीं, वहाँ जाके खड़े हो जाएंगे, इनकी हिम्मत नहीं होगी. ये ट्रक्स में भर भर के आ रहे हैं, ये डीजल और पेट्रोल और ये टायर लेके आ रहे हैं, इन्होंने कल बिल्कुल गदर कर देनी है. They had already done that. We had seen a bit of it already on Ring Road. Trucks and all were beginning to burn. So he said, no, you've told me, okay, fine, you know. And he didn't do anything about it. That was it. In fact, after all this got over, my sister was to get married. And my dad, that time was in Jalandhar, so he told me to go and meet General Jamwal, वो Wons Club के लिए fix करो, कि शादी वादी का जो भी है. पर तुम जाओगे उनको मिलने तो be careful because he's been telling everybody that you're too big for your boots. You tried to advise him during the riots and all that. मैं गया उनके पास, मैंने कहा कि मिला, मैं तो I was not going to shadow this subject. And I met him, and when it was time for me to get up and go, he said, sit down, I want to talk to you. So then he said, you had lost your head. He tells me, you lost your head during the riots. I kept mine. मैंने कहा, so you kept yours at what cost? Almost 3,000 people lost theirs, you know. But what he believed, what he did was right. So a lot of things happened in 84. Then after that, I had gone to Amritsar on the first flight which went, when all these people who were battered, and Gyari Sahib Singh gave us a very damning interview where he gave a call to all Sikhs to take weapons and go and avenge the deaths in Delhi. What do? You've got a tape like this on your hand. And I was the one who was interviewing him because with me was Dilip Ganguly from AFP. He didn't understand a word of Punjabi. वो तो मुझे घड़ी घड़ी पूछ रहा था क्या बोला. मैं कहा तू चुप रहे, just keep quiet. Then I asked Sahib Singh, I said, sir, can I use your phone? वो काला वाला उनका वो डायल वाला था, तो उन्होंने कहा हाँ. मैं कहा he said चाय पाई पियो, कड़ा प्रसाद लेके आता हूँ. He went off to get it. So I called up the army number. और आर्मी नंबर में जीएससी को आपको कनेक्ट नहीं करेंगे, वो आधा घंटा आपका सिर खा जाएंगे कि स्ट्रेंथ 5, स्ट्रेंथ 6, इज इट क्लियर, इज इट नॉट क्लियर, हु द हेल आर यू, ऑल दैट. बट अमेजिंगली दैट ऑपरेटर ही पुट मी थ्रू एंड आई गॉट थ्रू टू द जनरल चिकी देवान हैड टेकन ओवर. ही इज फ्रॉम द अहमद को एंड ही सेड हाँ बोलो. तो मैंने कहा सर ऐसा है, आई गॉट दिस टेप इन माई हैंड, आई एम गोइंग बैक टू मोहन इंटरनेशनल वेयर आई स्टे. And please get the police to take it off us because I can't give it to you. I can't come to army and say, I've got this interview because as a journalist, I can't do that, but you can take it off. I'm telling you, I've got it. So he said, stall for some time and get there. So मैंने तो दिलीप को कहा चल कोई परिक्रमा दिखाते हैं. साहिब सिंह को बोला कि can we have some more prasad? So, people are doing that kind of stalling tactics. And when we walked into Mohan International in the lobby, there was the SP was there, SP or whatever he was. He used to wear his pistols, white handle wali, ulta pehte the. He used to, like General Patton used to wear, no? His name was Sheetal Das. And later one of his informants had grabbed his own pistol and killed him with his own gun. So he was standing there leaning against the counter. So when I walked in, he says, are you Kunal? I said, yes. वो पिस्टल लेके मेरे मुंह पे मारी खींच के. And took the tape recorder from my bag and smashed it on the floor and the mic, but he started jumping on it. In the meantime, some of the other Punjab police fellows gave Dilip Ganguly the treatment of the rifle butt से ठोक दिया पेट वेट में. वो तो उसको बेचारे को उल्टियाँ लगी. We thought he's going to die. It was that bad. Then they took the tape and they went away. And then we got Dilip to a room. वो पटिया लगा रहे थे. The telephone operator was sitting there, poor lady. ये तो मरने वाला है, somebody is taking his pulse, and he is vomiting away because you hit somebody like that, it's quite brutal. And then after about 3 hours, we got a call from UNI because AFP had a tie-up with UNI. They used to transmit through their network. भैया तो you chaps better get out of Amritsar because the general here has spoken to the corps commander in Jalandhar. General Gauri Shankar, and he told him कि Ashok's son Kunal has to, पूरा उसको बता दिया ओपन लाइन पे, इनको मालूम है तो तुम लोगों के तो भाई यहाँ पे वाट लगने वाली है, you get out of here. I didn't know what to do. And with a sick Dilip, he could hardly walk. We bundled him into a car, went straight to the GOC's house. And General Chiki Diwan was off to the Wagah border. He said, I'm off to the Wagah border. So anyway, his wife, we used to call her Winnie Auntie, she said, go on. Wonderful lady. Yeah. She said, Kunal, don't worry, I'll get you out. And she called these guys. These Jongas came with 2 Jongas, open Jongas, black patkas and all. And I'll never forget those words. He told them, take them to the airport. I've told the aircraft to wait for them. Get them onto the flight. If anybody tries to stop you, even the police, shoot them. So I said, this is command and control. But she got us out. She got us out. And I couldn't go back to Amritsar for quite some time after that because of this thing that had happened. But the way I see it, in fact, I got into a lot of trouble for this. That you, as a journalist, why the hell are you trying to do your own thing? If you got an interview, it's your bloody job to now broadcast it. But you grow up with certain ideas, you don't give a damn about those things.
You were a patriot.
I wouldn't like to use, that's a word, which is a term. I think this is inborn. You either have it in you or you don't. In the army, you don't think twice. Nation always comes first. So, from the day you're born, you're taught that. So, you look at it from that perspective. We saw Punjab burning. I've covered it a lot. I used to go with the troops for these cordon and searches. I know what all has happened. Later, I spent 4 or 5 days with BB Corps. I've documented all that in the books.
But what happened immediately after the Operation Blue Star and the job was given to the army, that didn't go down very well.
It never would have. How did you expect it to go well? In fact, what they did in Black Thunder, what you referred to about the police officers saying, was what they should have done in Blue Star. Going into Blue Star with all guns blazing and then bringing in tanks. Even that is now being denied by certain sections of society. We never used tanks. You did it. And once you've done it, okay, it was a huge blunder, it was a mistake. But it happened. There was झूठ बोलने से कि नहीं हुआ जी, ये नहीं हुआ, ये कितना वो कितना वो. सबको मालूम है क्या हुआ था. But in fact, it's very important to stick with the truth because if you don't, there's a lot of counter narratives flaring up everything on the other side.
We've seen that interview that General Brar did with Smita Prakash.
Yeah.
And there he said that, okay, General Sundarji told them that the Pakistanis are coming in and we got to flush these people out. So, was that the compulsion or kya?
They said that they had certain Russian satellite images which showed us amount of build-up on the Pakistani side. But those kind of build-ups happen all the time. I mean, every time there is this thing, they are going to always do something. And what were the Pakistanis actually going to do? Let's presume that these fellows had gone ahead and declared Khalistan from inside the temple. Well, see, what they did later in the subsequent operation, Black Thunder, they starved them out. We need to do the same thing over here. And in fact, this horrible thing was that General Sundarji was in such a rush, which is exactly what he did in Sri Lanka, by the way. He was always a man in a hurry. My dad used to describe him, I actually quoted him in the book, where he used to say he was a very brilliant man. I had some superb interaction with him on the environmental front, etc., etc. And I had a lot of respect for him at that level. But my dad used to say he's like a chap who will come and open the bonnet of a jonga and say all these plug points are wrong, सारी उसके तारे खोल देंगे, फिर उनको वापस कैसे लगाऊं वो नहीं मालूम. So there was always this complete disconnect between him and he never looked at logistics as being a major issue. And that's exactly what went wrong in Sri Lanka also. So you can't rush into these situations. You have to be very, very cautious. And I think Mrs. Gandhi made a huge mistake, like her father, by bypassing the chain of command. Because Operation Blue Star was an internal thing, we don't talk about it in the same way as we talk about 1962. But in 1962, Nehru bypassed the chain of command and went straight to call, and that created the entire imbalance. And that is exactly the mistake Mrs. Gandhi has made after having been very balanced and having listened to General Manekshaw at that time, in 71. But 13 years later, she makes a complete boo-boo of the whole situation by again circumventing the chain of command. You circumvent the chain of command in the armed forces, you've had it.
Okay, so talking about Sundarji, he also did a few brilliant things, Operation Brass Tacks, for that matter.
Yeah.
Or Sumdorong Chu.
Sumdorong Chu was General Narhari, who was the corps commander at that time. He was a sapper officer, like your current chief is a sapper officer. And I think General V.N. Sharma was also there. But these guys, see, a lot of things.
General Sharma was Eastern Command.
Eastern Command, and I think he went on to become the chief after that there itself. But there they stood up to the Chinese. It was fantastic. And actually, General Sunaji, if you met him and interacted with him, he came across as a very forceful person. He was from my college. We were in MCC together, so we had that little bond. And later we did this wildlife workshops, etc. So I interacted quite a lot with him. And it was very difficult not to be completely overawed by his personality. And when he would be interacting with Rajiv Gandhi and Arun Singh and all that, they would always be, they were not a patch on him. He could out-talk them in a matter of minutes. And they were not country bumpkins. I mean, they were pretty educated guys themselves who were very, very well read, and at least Arun Singh was. And yet they made a whole lot of mistakes. But General Sundarji had this tendency. You see, when he was even commanding one Mahar in the run of Kutch, we had the Sadar Post incident where the CRPF and the Gujarat Armed Police initially tackled the Pakistanis. But they had initially set a trap at Kanjarkot. Kanjarkot is where the run of Kutch finishes. It's the hard ground on Sindh. There's the ruins of a fort with these sand dunes. And they had put an ambush. And when this initial trouble happened, they wanted the Indians to attack. So General Sundarji was all set to go. That time a lieutenant colonel, his instinct was attack. But they had set a trap. And the brigade commander that time, I think Brigadier Paranjpe or someone, he had to really, literally restrain him. Bhaiya bas karo, marwaoge. We were not prepared for it. It would have been a massacre. They were waiting. So he always had this streak. Mind you, a lot of people in the army, even today, think that he was one of the best generals we ever had. He brought a lot of other concepts in, like rapids and this and that. And he was a man who was not scared of getting tied down by tradition and stuff like that. Willing to look at, he was not an armored corps officer, he was a Mahar officer. Mahar people, basically, they were these machine gun units, which used to be there in the army. And there are a lot of things in General Sundarji's favor, but the larger operations, whether it was BlueStar, Sri Lanka, he cannot absolve himself of the responsibility, but he was to a great extent responsible for it.
IPKF and BlueStar.
Yeah, because you got to think these things through. Though. You can't just chal pade, I mean, there are so many issues involved that you have to really tread with a lot of care and caution.
What do you think of this strategy of Pakistan to create internal turmoil in India? Because a lot of these Pakistani generals and other thinkers, they keep saying that the Muslims in India are like their fifth column and they will activate them whenever they want. और देखते भी हैं कई बार कि वहाँ से होता है थोड़ा सा तो इधर भी प्रॉब्लम हो जाती है.
See, the fact is that a lot of Muslim families have very close ties with the Pakistani side. Because वही घर के 3 भाई उधर चले गए, एक यहाँ रह गया या 2 उधर चले गए, यहाँ रह गया, तो इनकी socially there's a lot of interaction.
Especially the Muslim elites. I think this is more common.
It is more because the non-elites don't have the resources to have even kept up with who's gone where. But I think the Muslim elite is not that influential when it comes to politics. They don't care. On both sides, I think even on the Indian side, the elite are quite removed from the day-to-day functioning of क्या हो रहा है. The radical elements तो आपके हर एक side में होंगे. There is no two ways about that. But when General Zia launched Operation Tupac, his theories and his thing was in Operation Tupac में उन्होंने clearly बोला था हम ऐसे करेंगे. And if you were a Pakistani commander, or if I was a Pakistani commander, why the hell would I not do exactly what he did? Because it was low-cost warfare. It was non-state actors का तो टैब उन्होंने 47, 48 से जो भी जाता था बोलते थे हमको कुछ लेना देना नहीं है इनके साथ. When Kargil, actually the POWs I filmed, were filmed with the intention of sending them back because the Pakistanis were saying they're not ours. There were 8 of them. 7 were from Northern Light Infantry. एक 22 पंजाब का था. वो तो जब मैंने इंटरव्यू करके फिर we splashed it all over the international media. They had no choice and they took them back. which is non-state actors business been going on for a long time. So there's low intensity warfare and he said, Bhutto said, we make them bleed with 1,000 cuts. Zia said, I'll implement it. And they've done it. And why wouldn't they do it? But you see, they can only do it if the fault lines exist on your side also. If you don't have those fault lines, nobody can, then it becomes Fortress India. आप आ ही नहीं सकते. और पंजाब में fault lines बना के रखी हुई है आपने वहाँ पे. I mean, before this we've gone through this. Every state has problems. So it's easy for anybody wanting to fish and create trouble to do so. And the only thing is your own intelligence agencies, your entire leadership, आपकी हुकूमत को एक step आगे रहना पड़ेगा इनके कि क्या हो रहा है. And sometimes you have to take some pretty tough steps. And you have to do that. But at the same time, you've got to be very careful because you don't want to further create fault lines also. So it's not an easy kind of a scenario. But one thing is there, wherever we have had Muslim units and Muslim army, I'm talking purely from army perspective, their performance has been absolutely first class. There's been absolutely no room for any doubt or any creation. For example, Khemkaran, I think we talked about it on an earlier occasion. There was 4 grenadiers who actually stopped the attack. And Abdul Hamid को उन्होंने जो PVC दिया है वो तो एक ही incident है of with his RCL gun whatever he did against patterns. But it was those Muslim companies of that battalion which were dug in over there in the front lines of Khemkaran. They never broke. And we've had Muslim troops in 15 Rajput and in various other units and some Muslim officers who have been absolutely outstanding right from the beginning. Brigadier Osman की कहानी से लेकर आप शुरू हो गई. तो उसमें डाउट किया है. वो डाउट क्रिएट करना है आपको वो बात अलग है. And but I think it is so vital that we just maintain that absolute iron fist with all 5 fingers making that fist because otherwise you're going to be in solid trouble.
Talking about Bhutto, आपने Bhutto की बात की अभी. So something that has always intrigued me is that a person like Indira Gandhi, who has her own persona and almost fiction-like figure, how did Bhutto make a fool of her to get all the POWs released and give nothing in return?
Bhutto was a very complex character. And it's important to understand exactly who the hell Bhutto was. Bhutto's father was the Prime Minister of Junagadh.
Shahnawaz.
And very few Indians are aware of it, that we actually had an amphibious landing in Kathiawar when Bhutto's father had tried to do all that and then he had to run and they went into Pakistan, etc. So Bhutto had a kind of almost pathological kind of a dislike for India. Though he grew up in Bombay and everything. But the fact was, he was so much so that the amount of damage he's done to India-Pakistan relations, usko to aap chhodiye. The amount of damage he's done to Pakistan itself is phenomenal. Because he tried to also inculcate this whole thing that they were not really Indians, they were more Arabs. He was happier to be a second-rate Arab than to be to live with pride as an Indian Muslim or whatever it was. So Bhutto had this thing. And then when he became foreign minister in 1960s, early 60s, Ayub Khan was the president. Now, Ayub Khan was not a very good army officer. In fact, his record in the army is pretty poor. He was with First Assam initially as the SEO. British gave him a lousy report, all that. But anyway, he made himself a field marshal. But as a president of Pakistan, he was doing a pretty good job. And he was not really a military man in that. He was a military man, but he was not the driving force. He was not very aggressive. The aggressiveness was coming from Zulfikar Ali Bhutto. Now, how did Bhutto become so powerful within Pakistan needs to be understood before we come to Mrs. Gandhi also. Mm-hmm. When, in 64, when the presidential elections took place, Ayub Khan was going to win hands down. But unfortunately, Fatima Jinnah, Muhammad Ali Jinnah's sister was standing against him. So Bhutto convinced him, let me rig these elections in your favor. Let's not take a chance. Ayub Khan maan gaye. And the day he compromised on that, this man became larger than life. And he was a foreign minister. Operation Gibraltar was planned by Bhutto with GOC 12 Pakistan Division, right, General Malik, without consulting GHQ or consulting Ayub Khan. They were at it for quite some time and they kept saying, give us permission. And Mao had helped, Mao had instigated Bhutto. Bhutto had come back, he had asked Ayub Khan had said, rubbish. हम मरेंगे वहाँ जाके. But ये लगा रहा. And you see, because of the huge amount of weapons and systems which had come in from the US, there was a lot of those old weapons which were available. So they could raise this private army in POK, which they literally used to send in 9 or 10 columns into India. उनके क्या नाम दिए हुए थे, गजनी, ये वो, all invaders which had come into the area before. This was all Bhutto's brainchild. Now, 65 war gets over, what happens? That whole period where the Awami League starts coming to place.
Even before that, there was this Swaran Singh committee and Bhutto.
Bhutto is the guy, because you see, Nehru had actually agreed to the partition of the valley. So with the maps, they had gone. Swaran Singh had led the party. And the day they were supposed to meet, the meeting was scheduled for 11. I think at 9 o'clock, Pakistan radio has announced that we have signed this deal with China and we are giving them Shashkam. So ये Swaran Singh party बिल्कुल चुप हो गई. उसके बाद वो जैसे के थे वैसे वापस आ गए. ये तो गया था. Kashmir was gone. At least a major part of it was gone.
Even otherwise, what they were negotiating was what Bhutto was asking.
Exactly.
That you keep Kathua and the rest of it. Rest of it is ours, including Jammu.
All the pressure was coming with the support of the British. Because right from the start, the Brits said actually the creation of Pakistan is entirely their doing, because they wanted a foot in the area so that they could control the oil fields of both Persia and, of Iran and Iraq, and more than that, Bahrain. So Bahrain was where the main refinery was. So all this nonsense was going on, and Bhutto was getting more and more powerful. Now, when the PPP, or the alignment that formed the PPP was there, when they came up against the Awami League, they got wiped out in the election in 1966. And that is when Yahya Khan comes in, and, there's so much pressure on Ayub. Ayub gives up. He just goes home on retirement. He brings Yahya Khan and says the civil government can't handle it. He makes him the de facto martial law administrator. And Yahya Khan is in complete awe of Bhutto. Both Yahya Khan and Tika Khan went to Bhutto's house to discuss the strategy and all that. And Bhutto is, can you believe it? The chief martial administrator is going to the foreign minister's house. And that time, prime minister designate kya? He was nowhere in the picture. And they refused. Ek General Setna hota the, he was BGS during the 71 war with General Jagdeep Singh Arora and with Jacob. He and we worked a lot together. He's a very fine officer. He was my dad's boss in Staff College, and then he was also from Doon School. And then he worked with me when I did all these films and all for the armed force. And I used to often ask him, so exactly work here Bangladesh mein? And he used to answer it in one sentence. His Pakistani mentality was, Sada Punjabi, Sala Bengali. And the whole thing unfolded on those lines. Ever Bhutto was calling the shots. Now, even during the 93,000 prisoners, Simla agreement, blah, 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 the fact is that these guys, from what I've heard, were constantly threatening that they will eliminate Mujib initially. If India doesn't do X, Y, Z, etc., etc. And I think that was one major trump card they had in their sleeve, because they were quite capable of killing him if it came to that. They killed him 4 years later in any case. But, the radical elements in Bangladesh, and after that what happened in Bangladesh? They wiped out the history of Bangladesh altogether. Suddenly India didn't actually exist in the liberation war. So there's a lot of complexity in what has actually transpired in the entire region.
No, but Mujib was released.
He was released
in January.
Yeah.
And the Shimla negotiations took place in April.
I know, but they sort of little bit of a hangover of that. I think he kept telling Mrs. Gandhi, he's a very good actor. Very good actor. And he, in fact, I've seen one of those film clips where he takes his shoe and bangs himself on the head, or on the table or whatever in the UN. He kept telling Mrs. Gandhi, if you don't give me these concessions, I cannot go back, and Pakistan mein ye ho jayega, wo ho jayega, ye ho jayega. And she I don't think. I mean,
She didn't consult General Manekshaw?
General Manekshaw, I don't think so, because the army had somehow in the political thing played its role, and in fact they were very shabby in their treatment of General Manekshaw in the subsequent years, as you know. Yeah, I mean everybody is aware of what actually happened.
वो भी
Manekshaw himself would not have wanted to get involved in the political aspect of the whole thing. He was very clear about one fact. He always used to say that even that whole conversation which he himself has put out initially, how he told us, sweetie, I'll keep my nose out of your business, you keep my yours out of mine, all that stuff. See, General Manekshaw had this amazing ability to come up with, he had a phenomenal memory. Okay. He had a phenomenal memory and
great wit.
You know, I'll tell you, he lived in Kannur. And he had a Labrador, which was mated with our dog. And we then had a male puppy, which we got from that litter, which is called Sher Khan. The mother was Missy. The Missy and Sher Khan were very famous dogs. They were beautiful looking labs, Sher Khan especially. And I ran into General Manekshaw on a flight from Delhi to Bombay. And people were going up to him and taking his autograph and this, that, and the other. And I was just keeping to myself. But he saw me. He saw me looking at him twice, but I just sort of wished him from a distance and kept quiet. We got into the bus, and General Manekshaw was standing in front, and I was standing at the back of the bus going to the aircraft. Airbus 300s hoti thi un dinon mein, if you remember. So in a very loud voice, he says, look at this chap. He's avoiding me. People don't know, his father and I, we are Samdis. Oh man, ये क्या हो गया? You know, so I'm not married to any party. I was looking this way, that way. Everybody looking at me. Then he says very loudly, he says, our dogs were mated, you see. So I heaved a sigh of relief. I filmed that clip of his in IMA where he talks about aapki gharwali bhi aapki taraf nahi dekhegi and all that. He was in his 90s by that time when he came for that thing, and I was doing the IMA film at that time, Making of a Warrior. What a personality. And you see, the thing about him was, he would come for dinner, let's say. He would go straight into your kitchen, he would go thank the cook, he would go thank the ayah, he would go thank the waiters, everybody. You know, there was not a single driver he would go past, ki, tum kahan ka rehne wala hai, ye, wo, etc. And with Gurkhas, of course, he had a different equation altogether. He was not from the Gurkha regiment. He was not from the Gurkha regiment. And yet, you know, he just adopted them, they adopted him. The whole Indian army loved him.
Everybody thought he was from the Gurkhas?
No, he never served with the Gurkhas. He never served with the Gurkhas. He was Frontier Force or something, and then after partition, he was attached to the Gurkhas, but he never served with them. There's a big difference in that. And then, of course, 8 Gurkhas, he was always that little red pom-pom of his. He's a very, very likable human being and amazing ability to say the right thing at the right time. I mean, you know, that's a skill. Great guy. But at one level, he was, as a person, loved by everyone. But there were certain aspects about him. Like when Mrs. Gandhi actually wanted to go into Bangladesh initially, he asked for 9 months gestation period, and he was right. Because, you know, the rivers needed to dry up a little bit, etc., etc. And the Indian army always needs time. He says so. He says, I've only got so many tanks operational. If I move bhi karunga, so I'll be competing with your railway, this thing for grain and all that. So he had his logic worked out. But the fact is, Rustum ji, who was the BSF chief that time, BSF had been in service for 6 years, they were willing to go in. And there's a flip side to this. There's a counter argument to this, because when I was in Bangladesh, the foreign minister of Bangladesh, he raised this point with me. He says, if General Manekshaw had not delayed for 9 months, we lost 3 million people. Maybe we would have lost 2. So these are factors which we're looking at history purely from an Indian perspective. You need to look at it from a slightly larger viewpoint also. So he was considered to be a bit of a defensive general, which he was. In fact, Jacob in his book has openly said so. And if General Manekshaw didn't like you, he used to call you sweetie. So he also, anybody who would address as sweetie, it didn't be Mrs. Gandhi. It was a term of, can't call it endearment, but kind of counter India. He said, sweetie. So 2 or 3 times he told Jacob, he said, sweetie, you're overstepping something. But then again, General Jacob, whatever he may say or whatever happened, he's the one who had the guts to fly into Niazi's headquarters. I mean, that takes pure, raw courage. Convince the man to surrender. So each man played his role in a very positive way. But as I said, Manekshaw would not have wanted to get involved in the political aspect of what happened. He remained the chief till 73. So he was very much in the saddle during the Shimla agreement.
Yes, but he wasn't consulted. That's what.
Bhutto
outsmarted Indira Gandhi.
He did. And he was a ड्रामेबाज था, वो निकल गया. मेरा ये हो जाएगा, वो हो जाएगा. Mrs. Gandhi had won the war. Atal Bihari Vajpayee had called her Durga. She was infallible.
Atal Bihari Vajpayee denied it later.
No, that's a different. Didn't he call her that? No.
But
the fact is, she was on a pinnacle where she felt she could be a little. She didn't get her POWs back. I mean, who the hell was advising her at that time? I think it's a huge crime.
I think we had only about 75 with them, and we didn't get them back.
We didn't get them back. We returned 93,000. And what a shame. I mean, what a shame that we didn't do it. We should really hang our heads in absolute shame for what transpired. How could we do that? But it happened. It got overlooked. Nobody thought of telling her. They've got our POWs too. Because unless I can only presume she wasn't told. Otherwise, how the hell could she brush that aside? She would not have. She was not the type of person. She would have certainly got them back.
Right now, what do you think is the capacity of Pakistan, one, to attack India directly, and two, to foment trouble internally?
Foment trouble internally, they're always going to try. They will never stop. वो तो उनकी आदत है. वो सुबह जब
But they are almost out of Kashmir right now.
See, the point is, it takes one shot for things to get bad again. Right? I mean, I used to often feel this when we were filming. I did the book on Assam rifles and I had a lot to do in the Northeast. Every time we were driving through, especially around that Palel and, Imphal Valley and all, such a peaceful scenario, paddy fields, women working.
Talking of Assam rifles, why are the Manipuris against the Assam rifles?
You want a very honest answer?
Yes.
The whole problem in the valley stemmed from the fact, initially when Dr. Manmohan Singh was the Prime Minister, there was that Manorma rape case, if you remember. Later inquiries showed that it was a setup kind of a thing. And the Assam Rifles was headquartered inside Kangla Fort. Now, if you have been to Imphal, Kangla Fort is the center. It's the hub of the city.
Been inside the fort.
So, unfortunately, at that time when Dr. Manmohan Singh came, the inquiry had not happened. It was happening. There was still a lot going on. All that stuff about APSA, this, that. A lot of protests and this, that. And he went and ordered the Assam Rifles to move out of Kangla Fort. Assam Rifles moved out, and after that, it was balle for everybody who was any kind of a criminal. And drugs are definitely a very big issue in the Northeast, including the Imphal area, because the whole Kachin Hills, everything are all interlinked. So there were lots of criminal activity, which these guys didn't want the Assam Rifles there. They used to say, oh, Assam Rifles is also involved in this, that and the other, but wo to har ek ke against aap kuch bhi dal do. Now, the moment you moved the force out of Kangla Fort, these guys, the situation in Manipur became that much more difficult to handle from a security forces point of view. They are actually what these MLAs and all did now, where they said ki get rid of the Assam Rifles because they're favoring the hill population, they're favoring the cookies, they're favoring this, that, was because they realized that the moment the Assam Rifles comes in, Assam Rifles being your only form of governance in the Northeast for decades, it's now that things are beginning to change. But till 10 years ago, Assam Rifles was it. They were the mother, father, uncle, auntie of everybody. I remember I was doing this book on Assam Rifles in 2009, and every time we would go to any village, the Gaon Buddhas and all used to come because they don't know who the hell I was just a filmmaker. But they would come and there would always be a petition. और petition में दो चीजें लिखी हुई होती थी. एक फुटबॉल फील्ड चाहिए और दूसरा एक असम राइफल का पोस्ट होना चाहिए यहाँ पे. So they felt secure if Assam Rifles was around. They call themselves the Friends of the Hill people, but it's actually a term which they've earned. It's a sobriquet which they've actually earned. So it is a very, very good paramilitary force. And it's a very unique force in the sense that it's mainly officered by the army. Now again, 45 units of Assam rifles were to be raised in 2009. Then that got scrapped. Now they're talking about the border. They're talking about this. Everything is ad hoc. Our border management policies have always been a bit suspect. I've spoken about it before, that we need to really cut these turf wars and have a common grid, whether it's security agencies, whether it's intelligence agencies, whatever. Until then, it's a... I mean, आप रह चुके हैं as in the administration, you've served in border areas, you know how many intelligence agencies are stepping on each other's toes. Nobody will tell the other guy what's happening.
they keep subverting each other.
तो वो तो बिल्कुल तमाशा बना हुआ है. And this on a larger scale is an absolute nightmare. It's an absolute nightmare. Assam Rifles, I think, till today, their SOPs, everything, even in ambushes and all, in many ways they're better than the army. Because they have a different system of operating. Army will not move without the support units coming in. उनका ASC आएगा, उनका ordnance आएगा, ये आएगा, वो आएगा. Assam units are all, Assam rifles are very compact. Their own purchasing power, people say a lot of corruption also. Maybe there is, God knows. I'm not denying that. I'm not getting into that. But as a fighting force, Assam rifles, it was top draw.
So what's the problem with the Assam rifles in Manipur now?
What I can make out, the people in the valley, that's the Baitik population, have been sort of saying that these chaps are more inclined to support the cookies, and which I personally doubt very much, because the Assam Rifles doesn't function that way. And in fact, I was talking to General Shaukin Chauhan, who had been the DG of Assam Rifles when this thing had flared up. I was in Pune, and we were discussing this. And he said, यार ये जितने भी MLAs जो अभी हल्ला मचा रहे हैं ना, get rid of these, he said, ये सब मेरे पास आए हैं for their own personal needs, and it's the Assam Rifles which has bailed them out of life-threatening situations when it suited them. So he said, this kind of mercenary behavior is not acceptable. I mean, he was talking at that level because he had been the DG. I've got very close Maiti friends. I've got very close Kuki friends. In fact, the spokesman of the Kuki front, Silen Haukip, he had been to my house. Maiti's General Consum Himalaya Singh, for example, he's from Tu Rajput, the first Lieutenant General of the Indian Army. He's like my elder brother. So, I've done the Northeast trilogy. I've been in and out of the Northeast. And I've seen these people individually, but again, वहाँ पे भी fanning trouble is not a problem. I mean, it's so easy to turn the Nagas against the Maitis against this, and they all have a history, you see, because it's all at some point or the other there have been clashes. Now the Nagas are showing tremendous maturity right now by not reacting. There would be
Nagas versus Kukis was the earlier
earlier clashes, if you remember. So, and they were also very, very nasty. And trouble in the Northeast is the trouble in the whole of India is that brutality is just under the surface. It's just bubbling. It's just waiting. And all this stuff about us being a non-violent country and all that nonsense which we inherited in 1947 is absolute rubbish.
That was the Gandhi hoax, anyway.
But you see, the thing is, you sometimes need to look in the mirror and actually see the reality. And not some other image which then makes you behave in a very warped sort of a way, because you then fall between stools. This country needs to be governed with a certain element of ruthlessness, because without that, you're going to be in solid trouble, which gives, of course, the opposition a handle of talking about love and brotherhood and blowing kisses in the air. It's not going to help you, because the real politics behind all this is hard money and economics. And even in Punjab, I've always said this, that I never met a single guy, and we used to interact a lot with the terrorists. In fact, I used to know most of them. Babar Khalsa, Yevo. Nobody was motivated by religion. They never talked about it. It was all youngsters with tremendous power. You had a weapon, you could people come to you and say, "Bhai ji, wo meri bibi de sath bhag gaya hai, you're passing judgment as a 23-year-old. You think you're God, yeah." Same thing in Kashmir. I spent 5 days with the Hizbul Mujahideen. I had gone across and in the valley itself, but I had infiltrated.
Gone across to the POK?
Not into POK. The army had got me across to spend 5 days with the Hizbul Mujahideen, and even Kukapare and all these chaps had helped to get me in there. I filmed it. The whole thing was filmed, and I brought that film back. Again, religion has nothing to do with it.
All raw power.
Raw power.
Power, money, women.
आप क्या 22 साल की उम्र में आपको एक हथियार दे दूं, बोलो आप बैंक में जाइए, पिस्टल रखो काउंटर पे, बोलो मेरे को 1 करोड़ रुपया मेरे बैग में डाल दो, वो डाल देंगे और बोलेंगे जी आप सॉफ्ट ड्रिंक नहीं लेंगे, वही गोइंग, आप तो बेइज्जती कर रहे हो हमारी विदाउट सिटिंग एंड हैविंग अ समोसा एंड अ कोल्ड ड्रिंक व्हाइल यू आर रॉबिंग द बैंक. So it's that kind of power, sir. It has to be seen to be believed, as to exactly what happens. And these youngsters are power drunk after a while, but they don't realize where they're going. And when it took a person like KPS Gill, and I think one name which we forget to mention with KPS Gill is also Ribeiro, that these two gentlemen actually they brought Punjab back from the brink of disaster at a huge cost of human lives. There were certain steps taken then, which all these people who are today talking Khalistan, this, that, etc., have no idea what the hell they're talking about. They have no idea. एक बारी ये शुरू हो जाएगा ना, you will go back into the dark ages. Absolutely. Just can't afford to let that happen.
Yeah, but then there are opportunists who
they are going to do it, but then you have to counter it. You have to eliminate them if it comes to it. You can't pussyfoot on these matters.
Right now, half the people who are masquerading as farmers, basically they're power peddlers.
I don't know. I haven't been following the exact build-up over here. I was too busy being on the road, getting to your location. You will always have that scenario. You will always have any demonstration, anything is always going to be, there are always people looking to mold and infiltrate it. And even the actual guy who may have a genuine grievance then becomes a target for no rhyme or reason. And that's how fault lines are created.
How do you see Kashmir after abolition of 370?
I personally feel, I was in Labasna the day the announcement happened. In fact, that day itself we had screened my film on Kargil War.
Mussoorie.
In Mussoorie, when this thing happened, and it was a big thing. So this was the question that was being asked, what do you think? And I said, well, I showed you the film last night. And the thing was that film had been shot 20 years before, in 1999. And while we were watching the film, even I was thinking that nothing has changed. Pulwama ke baad ye wo, wahi cordon and searches ho rahe hain, wahi log dabe hue hain, ye wo. So I said, if all said and done, we can carry on ad nauseum like this for the rest of our lives. But by having taken the step of abrogating the law or whatever it wasn't really it was a kind of an addendum or whatever they did. So at least it's a step in some direction. No? And as a military historian, all I can say is we're too close to the event to really pass judgment on it. What exactly the effects of 370, the carving out, separating Ladakh. Now, I've been in Ladakh. I spent 3 years in Ladakh in Tiger Tops before I came down and became a journalist. Ladakhis have always never seen themselves, I'm not been very happy of being the poorer cousin of Kashmir. Forget about Ladakhis, the whole Jammu, Poonch, Mirpur, Naushera, these belts, they've always felt like they're given step-brotherly treatment. So there are a lot of wheels within wheels in the valley itself. Forget the valley, in the state itself. And I think Jammu, unfortunately, has never been able to throw up a leadership of its own, for whatever reason, despite the fact that the Maharajas and all Dogras were basically Jammu-based. But somehow, Jammu Poonch, when I say Jammu, I mean Rajouri Poonch, has not been able to throw up a political personality who's been able to take matters in his own hand. It's all been very valley-centric. So the problems there are again very different. But I think my own thing is that if you had not abolished 370 or repealed it at that time or whatever you did, I don't know the legal term for it, I think we would have just been in the same state. वही शिकारा को आप उसी चाकू से चलाओ, वो नहीं चल रही तो फिर कुछ तो ट्राई करो.
You keep moving in circles.
वो एक ही जगह में आप बैठे हो, so and whoever wants can take a shot at you. Now at least you're moving now. And I would like to think that the situation in the valley, because I've lived in Srinagar also. For that Tiger Tops period, I was in Ladakh and Srinagar. The whole economy of the thing is around tourism and this, that. Kashmiri wonderful people, let them be. They've just been seeped in this whole nonsense of propaganda which has been hurled at them from all sides. And one of the things is our own narrative as far as Kashmir is concerned needs to be very firmly said and told, because this is one area where we tend to fail. We're not very historically minded ourselves. We tend to, we don't particularly forcefully come up with it. For example, I'll give you one example. For example, this whole business of Nehru and plebiscite. Pakistan kept repeating it: plebiscite, 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 plebiscite. What were the clauses with plebiscite? Is that we just kept quiet.
They never talked about the clause 1.
Clause 1, 2, 3, 4.
It's only after internet that we started talking about it.
So it was only that we woke up to it much later. But if you remember, even our editorials and all used to be defensive about this plebiscite business for years, for decades. अब जब जाके सबने देखा अच्छा ये भी है, but so that narrative has to be met and it has to be taken on.
Actually, one thing has happened because, I haven't been to Kashmir very often, but 370 used to give them a justification of having a separate identity. And that kind of welded into separatism at a certain level, fueled it, and at a certain level gave them a different kind of feeling. That has gone away.
I can give you an example which on the face of it may seem I'm going off the topic, but I'm not. The first story I did for India Today when I came back from Kashmir was on the fur trade.
On?
Fur trade. And India had passed its own Wildlife Act in 1972. Kashmir said, no, Article 370, we will have our own Wildlife Act. Right? Then India became a signatory to CITES and IUCN, where you were not allowed to deal with animal products. Ivory and fur, whether it was tiger skin, leopard skin, jackal fur, any damn thing, it came under IUCN's Red Book, khatam, not allowed. Kashmir said, no, we are 370, we have 40,000 artisans who are working on the fur trade. Unka kya hoga? So, Mrs. Gandhi, in her wisdom, sends a fact-finding team to the valley. 3 very senior people, whose names I can't offhand remember, but they went on to head in tech in this, that, and this. They were senior guys. They lined up in the valley. They are wined and dined by the state government. And Kashmir hospitality, you know how it is fantastic. Houseboats and kawas and what have you. And they are shown some stocks of skins. And they sign on the dotted line that yes, we have physically examined and there are 4 lakh tiger, leopard, snow leopard skins, there are 4 lakh jackal skins, there are 4 lakh caracal skins. हर एक चीज को वो सवा शेर वाला स्टोरी वो सबको साइन करा लिया. अब 4 लाख स्नो लेपर्ड तो आपके एवोल्यूशन से नहीं हुए होंगे, because it's not that kind of an animal, right? But now they had this wonderful thing that they had this in stock till this stock gets expired. Now, J&K was issuing its own NOC, right? And if you bought a snow leopard coat, now snow leopard coat meant 6 animals had lost their lives for that coat. It cost the earth, even then. 1 लाख के ऊपर होता था उसका कॉस्ट, ज़्यादा होता था. लेकिन आपको एक एडोसी मिल जाती थी from the wildlife department under their own law, which said this was, and now this is where they got greedy. जैसे 4 लाख का हमारे पास है तो सारे को 4 लाख पे ही रहने दो यार. तो ये जो स्नो लेपर्ड का कोट है उसमें they used to write Pardus domesticus, Kashmiri name Moolan. Alright, there's no such thing. Alright, but anybody going to Frankfurt would flash this thing and go through here. So we said, what the hell's going on? So this is the first story I did for India Today. And Mrs. Gandhi actually sent for me. My dad was doing the NDC course that time when I went. She even made me a glass of Tang and all that. She says, how much evidence do you have? I said, ma'am, everything is backed up. This is what they're doing. Now I'm giving you a wildlife parallel here to show you exactly what the hell was going on. Rajasthan, आपकी स्टेट से, truckloads of jackals were going into Kashmir. और बताऊं कैसे मारते थे? पेड़ में छेद करते हैं, उसमें 2 कीले ऐसे डालते हैं, पॉइंटिंग इनवर्ड, उसमें मीट डाल दीजिए. जैकॉल सिर तो डाल लेगा, निकाल नहीं सकता क्योंकि वो कीनों ने पकड़ लिया. And they don't want to shoot the animal. And those 2 holes in the back of the neck just near the jaw are acceptable. If that didn't have it, the skin had no value. And trucks were being caught, sir. Trucks with 30,000, 40,000, 50,000 skins of jackals. Caracal, which is only found in Rajasthan and this part of, and maybe parts of Gujarat. जा रहे हैं कश्मीर भर के. तो जो भी इनको लकूने मिल रहे थे 370 के अंडर, ये हर एक चीज में गड़बड़ कर रहे थे. The Indian mind is also like that. And the Kashmiri mind is one step ahead of the Indian mind when it comes to looking for how to get around these kind of things. And it was bizarre. I'm not saying that by repealing 370 suddenly the whole thing has got sorted out. No, but the fact is I'm giving you one example on wildlife, but this was there for just about everything. They used to openly say, no,
yes. They did not even have a Prevention of Corruption Act.
Yeah.
So Indian PC Act did not apply. They had their own version, which was a diluted version.
Absolutely. And you couldn't do a damn thing because the law said so. So, in a way, I am a great advocate for
things like, they could tell their women that if you marry outside, then you are no longer citizen.
Yeah, you're
Kashmir.
They had a word for it. But anyway, these I think the universal civil code is, how the hell can it not apply, is my big question to all the smart lawyers who go around arguing against it or for it. The fact is that wherever you give a little bit of a lacuna, उसमें 50 और हाथ डाल देंगे उसमें. So you have to be very...
Let's talk about the Naxalite situation. You think that we have dealt with it with the resolve that it really deserved?
So I know one thing about it which I can talk about, because when I co-authored General V.K. Singh's autobiography, we started with this, where he had just become the chief and he goes to meet Mr. P.C. Chidambaram, right, who's the Home Minister. And Mr. Chidambaram doesn't even ask him to sit down. He said, General, I want you to declare the parts of Chhattisgarh and all this as disturbed area and the army has to be brought in. And VK said, no, I'm not going to do it. And he said, why? He said, because they're my own people. He said, well, that applies to Manipur and Kashmir also. He said, the situation there is different. We have an external border, there's cross-border, this thing, that thing, and the army being deployed there is different. We are not going to do that in central India. That was the beginning of VK's clash with, General VK's clash with the establishment. That age issue, etc., came up for different reasons. They were all cooked up nonsense. I mean, it was bizarre. But the government went for him hammer and tong after that because of this. Now here was, I mean, I don't know Mr. P.C. Chidambaram personally or anything, but there was this huge thing about declaring the whole area as a disturbed area, and it's all minerals and this, that, stuff like that. There are various lobbies that work here. And when the general said, I'm not going to do this, then, the onus fell on your Cobra Force, all this. It took them time also to find their feet. You cannot just be thrown into insurgency and expect to suddenly be on top of the whole thing. Insurgency is one of the most difficult things to handle. Even in Nagaland and in Mizoram, when the problem happened, in fact, General Manekshaw was the Eastern Army commander. What did General Manekshaw do when Mizoram erupted? He just followed the British system of what the British had done in Malaya. There's a term for it. It's known as the Reed's theory or whatever. So they just implied that. That's what they did. Now, in central India, you can't do that. And we had enough of our own SOPs, etc., of dealing with this. But army officers were not leading the situation here. And it took a while for the cadre of CRPF and all these other internal security forces who were otherwise completely dominated by the IPS. I don't have a problem with the IPS. But these internal cadres, the guys who are actually running it, whether it's ITBP, etc., I think they need a lot more boosting. And I think it's been recognized and they're probably doing it now. Their own academies are coming up. They're training those guys a lot. And these forces have evolved for their own self-protection. In the beginning, you remember some of the ambushes, we lost people like...
Oh, yes.
I mean,
one of them, I think we lost 76.
Yeah. In dozens they were going, And so it's taken them a while. They've done whatever they had to do. And unlike the army being deployed where the news agencies and everybody get very involved, यहाँ पे थोड़ा सा वो इतना ज़्यादा press में भी नहीं है. It's not that much. I spent some time with these guys I was shooting Project Tiger in Indravati Reserve. And Baba Amte's son, Dr. Prakash Amte, he has a hospital there called Hemal Kasa. So I ferried my equipment across. I shot Project Tiger after I stopped being a journalist. And we went to Hemal Kasa and he said, I'll fix a meeting with the Naxalites. They'll take you to the Abu Jabar area, well and good. If they'll come and speak to you. So first night nobody came. We used to sleep outside with Machadani and nets and all that. And then second night they came at around 2 in the morning and they spoke to me at length. And I wasn't sure at that time. I thought their leader was a bit effeminate, if I may use that term. But they said, okay, be ready in the evening. They came, they helped us with the equipment. They went inside, spent 5 days there filming with them. It was incredible footage. It was all these Maria Gonds and stuff like that. And then I later realized that it wasn't a guy who was effeminate, it was actually a woman who was the leader. And after 3 days or so, we were sitting there. By that time, chat every now and then. So I told her, I said, you're dropping us back. I've been listening to your voice for quite some time. Why don't you take off that niqab? Let me see what you look like. So she did this, and then she giggled, and she said, but if I do that, you realize, Kunal, I'll have to kill you. So I said, thank you very much. I can live without knowing what you look like. But I'd rather retain my head. We had it was quite an experience. Quite an experience. And it's a very, very difficult area to operate in.
So do you think that now a headway has been made in the Naxalite situation in the last 10 years or so?
Seems to be under some sort of control. But as I said earlier, it takes one shot to disrupt the entire thing all over again. So it's a continuous process. And a lot of grievances were genuine. For example, very little development work had actually happened in these areas.
But the Naxalites don't let that happen.
Well, there are two ways of looking at it. Because in 1986, when I was shooting Indravati, these girls used to come out of the forest and they not wear a stitch of clothing. And they would come and there were these guys who would try to bribe them with plastic bangles and this, that and the other. And left to them, they would exploit these females in various ways. But because of the fear of Naxalites, if you don't give them if you try to exploit that woman or get funny with her, they'll come and chop your hand off. That's their justice. So everybody has to behave themselves. When these girls came, first thing they did was put their hands behind their back and dealt across them with the counter. There was an element of fear. But you see, a lot of development under the present regime since 2014. We've all seen it. I mean, you can howl about it from an environment perspective, this perspective. But what has happened in this country in networking and everything that has happened, I don't think there's any remote area left in that sense. You go to Arunachal, you'll see the roads are being constructed. You go to any part of the country, these highways are coming up. It's crazy. So these are cutting across the entire fabric of this nation. And that is probably in itself going to have a very major impact in, that feeling of complete isolation and exploitation. There's still a lot of problems. I mean, you go into the rural areas, the poverty and all is shocking, especially rural Maharashtra and that belt, Chota Nagpur, stretching right across central India. It's terrible. A lot of work needs to be done, but
things are happening.
Things are
definitely.
happening.
Now even
Things are happening.
a railway line is coming up through the Bastar area.
Yeah. Well, Bharat Mata ki jai. We can all hope for the best, but we will continue to have issues. I mean, because there are too many people waiting on the wings to Gundi Kamao, and including people sitting right inside sitting in your own laps. Because until we start getting very serious about our own country, that fortress India वाला जो concept है ना, जब तक वो आपके दिमाग में नहीं आएगा, and especially Indians sitting outside of here, they think they are on a different plane. Well, let them think what they want. Eventually, this is their home. आएंगे तो यहीं पे ना घूम फिर के जब.
Right. So, thank you very much.
Pleasure, sir.
शिव कुणाल जी, और आपसे बात करने में बड़ा आनंद आया, और निश्चित रूप से ये जो विषय है बहुत महत्वपूर्ण है, जिसको आपने कहा कि दिस इज़ द टू फ्रंट एंड चाइना एंड पाकिस्तान इज 0.5. दैट्स अ वेरी वेरी प्रेग्नेंट रिमार्क, आई मस्ट से. आप सभी दर्शकों को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. शिव कुणाल जी को बहुत बहुत धन्यवाद. जय हिंद, जय भारत, वंदे मातरम.
जय हिंद.